G'day guys, Nogs here. Today I want to show you the 4 most important things to learn if you want to improve your damage in World of Warcraft. In the previous video, we went over the must-have add-ons and UI changes to put you in the best position to succeed. And the fact you're watching this video hopefully means you're interested in improving further and getting more out of the game like I have. This guide isn't just for beginners, it's also aimed at veteran players or returning players looking to progress into harder content. After following these 4 basic steps, I can guarantee you will see an improvement in your damage and overall enjoyment from the game that we love. Without a doubt, the most important thing to learn is your class and spec. Like most online games, the meta of WoW is constantly evolving. One day you think you've got the hang of it, and the next day a new talent pops up, potentially turning your comfortable rotation on its head. The best way to stay up to date with your spec is through research. Resources like Icy Veins, YouTube, and most importantly the class discords will ensure you have a constant flow of information on the current meta, giving you well-published information and guides on how to master the class. I've linked all the class discords below to help those who aren't familiar with the Discord app. Once in the Discord, scroll down to your specific spec page and check out the pinned and resources tab. Here you will find an abundance of information and guides about your rotation and optimal gear. It is a good idea to constantly revisit the pinned section if you're looking to excel at your class, as the amount of high-end players and sim crafters will never hesitate to share the information or answer questions with the player base as soon as a new meta is discovered. Once you've got a general understanding of how your spec should be played, now it's time to put in the work. There's a saying that anyone can master a skill with 10,000 hours of practice. This could not be more true for World of Warcraft. Whilst it may not take you a year and a half to fully master a spec, there's always room for improvement no matter how good you are. There's many ways for a player to analyse their mistakes and improve on damage, but the best foundation and resource to start with is Warcraft Logs. Warcraft Logs is a third-party site in which players can upload their combat logs to. The site then takes that player's information and illustrates almost everything about that fight or dungeon into a comprehensive and detailed layout for you. After a raid or dungeon, one of the guild officers will typically upload the logs for everyone to see. However, this is where most players make the biggest mistake. They click the link and check out their pass percentage, but that's about the extent of their analysis. I personally made this mistake for months until I got sick of passing under 50% of the population. While everyone else was having fun in Mythic Plus, I sat there combing through logs and comparing my passes to the top 10% of players with similar fight timers. Looking at things like dot time, buff stacking, positioning, spell priority, and most importantly, total spells casted. To compare yourself to better players, click the drop-down menu at the top left-hand corner. Select an encounter, difficulty, spec, and item level bracket, and try and find a player with a similar kill timer to what your raid had, and start comparing everything you can. This was the turning point for me, as I immediately started to realise I wasn't casting nearly enough spells compared to my peers. This was mainly attributed to my poor movement. As a caster, stutter stepping is the most important tool you have. Before I learnt this, if I needed to move somewhere for a mechanic, I used to wait until the last second before moving, and whilst travelling to the destination, I casted absolutely nothing. Over time, this all adds up to a huge amount of downtime that could be otherwise used casting spells. The more familiar you are with the fight timers, the more power you have to change the outcome of your damage. As an example of this, on Varamathras in Antorus the Burning Throne, I saw balanced druids getting much more star surges off than myself. This was due to the good players watching the fight timers, allowing them to pull instant cast resources and spenders for when they have to switch sides to avoid Dark Fissure. This ensured they had almost no downtime. I cannot stress how important it is that if you want to increase your damage, you need to take advantage of the global cooldown to cast as many abilities as possible, regardless if you're melee or range. If you're having trouble navigating Warcraft logs and need a bit more direction on where to improve, then WoW Analyzer is a must-see. This site requires you to link your Warcraft log URL, which can also be found by searching your character's name. Once the URL is imported, find yourself on the list and go through the tabs to see the biggest improvements that could be made. Whilst not every fight allows you to maximize all the relevant categories, it is a great tool at identifying basic mistakes and steering the player in the right direction. This can also be used for healers and tanks, but is not always 100% accurate, as the support roles are very situational depending on your composition. It is always a good idea when comparing your logs to high-end players with similar gear to also look for similar fight timers. This is another huge oversight and frustration to players who want to improve, but they feel they've hit a wall because the rest of their raid isn't optimizing themselves to reduce the overall kill times, therefore reducing everyone's overall pass. The best advice I've received from the top end community is to always focus on your own mistakes first. If you excel and stand out from your raid group, it won't be long until higher progression guilds poach you for their roster. But if you're raiding with your mates and don't want to leave them behind, then it's a good idea to share the information and skills you've learnt with your team. Remember, the key to this is being patient. Some people take more time to improve than others, and that's just how life works. The fourth and final tool used to improve your damage is character simulation. This is exactly how it sounds. A computer will simulate and play your character on the interwebs to deal the most optimal damage based on the variables entered. People use sites like Raidbots and SimC mainly to acquire information about how their stats contribute to their overall damage. This can tell us if we have too little or too much of a certain stat, giving the player further direction on how to gear appropriately. To sim your character, it's very simple. Follow the below link to Raidbots. From here you can compare your gear and talents to generate stat weights based on a specific encounter. As you can see, it's showing my character yields the most value from the intellect stat, closely followed by versatility. But if you change one piece of gear, the stat weight values will most likely change overall. The easiest way to stay on top of this is to constantly simulate the best gear in your character's inventory. This requires you to download an add-on called SimC from the Twitch application. SimC doesn't do anything to your game, it just copies the gear IDs from your character and the bags, so you can import them straight into Raidbots to configure out the best combination. The add-on called Pawn allows you to see if an item is an upgrade or not whilst in the game. This is illustrated by a green arrow and has a percentage value next to the piece of gear. If you download Pawn from the Twitch client, you will however need to add the specific stat weights based on your character's setup. I can't tell you how many people I've come across that use Ask Mr. Robot or don't update Pawn stat weights and just equip whatever has a green arrow next to the item. To import your stat weights properly, we need to go back to our Raidbot simulation, and there should be a box below our generated stat weights called Pawn String. From here, you just need to copy the text straight into your add-on in-game. Each time you get a new piece of gear, it is a good habit to sim yourself. And I guess the one upside to personal loot in BFA is that you will have more time to sim the gear that dropped before trading it off to a fellow member or trial. Another mistake I often see veteran players make is thinking the only sim in the world that matters is single target patchwork fights. Over the years, single target fights have become somewhat extinct, especially as raid difficulty increases. It is important now to sim yourself in all situations, especially in AoE cleave, as the stat weights can dramatically change from boss to boss. In Battle for Azeroth, Blizzard has decided to homogenize the stats in an attempt to reduce the player's need to sim as much. This is all part of their design philosophy to reduce the gap between the top 5% and the general player base, making higher end content even more accessible to new players. The developers have said they want intellect, agility and strength to be the best stat, meaning that if you're not sure which piece of gear is better, it's usually the safest option to go with the highest item level. Now this is just their ideology, and only time will tell if it actually works across all the classes and specs. Even if item level is king, simming will still be important in BFA, as it is a great tool to any player who wants to maximize and improve. Just don't fall in the trap of simming more than actually playing the game. You could be running with suboptimal gear and stats and still produce high numbers because you're reducing the amount of downtime in encounters due to good movement and planning ahead. Hopefully this quick rundown was informative enough for those new or returning players that want to push the limits and embrace their competitive nature. But always remember, dead DPS equals no DPS. Experienced raid leaders will always be able to tell if you're ignoring mechanics to get higher numbers on the meters, so the best option is to master the fight first, then focus on damage second. I strongly recommend everyone check out the resources linked below and practice at identifying what you're doing differently to the better players. Who knows, maybe in the future you will become that better player that beginners look up to. As always, I want to thank you guys for the continued support you've shown. The channel growth in the past month has blown my mind, and I couldn't be more grateful for the opportunity you guys have given me to create content and help others throughout the game. I hope to continue to bring you guys more videos in the future, especially as Battle for Azeroth is right around the corner. Cheers all.